JBN Comics presents Heru. When an asteroid falls from outer space to Earth, a runaway slave finds the asteroid and is endowed with superhuman powers. He sets about on a mission to free his people and change the world. Unknown to him, the very asteroid that gave him his powers carries a dark secret that could destroy the world. Heru, the first hero.
You are now part of a social experiment.
See now where my limit is, only got no ohs.
Welcome to the program. Thank you for joining us today on the journey towards self-mastery. Our next guest is redefining the comic book universe with a touch of Blackness. He grew up with a deep fascination and love for comics, but he realized that all his beloved heroes were all white. After seeing the menial roles Black characters had and learning the importance of positive Black representation, he set out to change the script and rewrite the tale of the Black hero. It took time to get his thoughts out, but after a prison stint, he was able to put his ideas on paper, and thus the story of Heru, the first hero, was born. He has his company, JBN Comics, that aims to change the narrative of Black heroes and establish a superhero universe with characters that look like us. He's also a Black studies teacher, a screenwriter with a background in theology. He uses his expertise to incorporate Black history, spiritual concepts, and a great storyline into his comics, thus creating a comic book experience like no other that will leave you educated, entertained, all the while wanting more. Let's welcome today, Mr. Jason Barrett. Mr. Barrett, how you doing today, sir?
I'm good, my bro. Very good. Thank you for having me. Really, really glad to be here, man. I started looking around at that introduction. I was thinking, who's coming, man? This sounds good.
Nah, man. I must tell the listeners, man, just looking at your comics, man, I was like hype, motivated, like just the whole way that you implement everything. You could see the deep thought. You know, you have Black history incorporated, you have theology, Egyptology incorporated. You know, I feel like, you know, this is something I could, present to my children, man. And not only is it like entertaining, which a lot of these, comics are mainly entertaining. And then like some of the, the fictional stuff is like the historical stuff is fictional, you know what I'm saying? So I did appreciate the truth and the honesty as far as history goes and everything that you incorporated, man. So I was like hype reading the comic, man.
Oh,
and I'm
man,
so glad I ran into it, man.
I'm glad you ran into it, bro. Trust me.
Yeah, man. And it's so much needed, man. And we mentioned in the intro, there is a history of, comics and, disregarding Black characters, having menial roles for Black superheroes, being sidekicks or whatever it is, man. So to have something that has a positive Black representation and, the comic character is not like a former gangster or former serial killer, like whatever it is that, you know what I mean, they like to put in. But this is a guy with a good heart and good soul and wants to do good for his people. Like we need those stories, man. And our kids need those stories, man. So super duper important, man. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing, man.
Thank you, my bro. Much appreciated. Those words are powerful, man. And you're right. I think a lot of the stuff that we've been doing with Heru has been birthed exactly from the things that you've just mentioned. The fact that the Black guy was always the sidekick, or the Black guy always had ulterior motives, or, the Black guy came from a dubious background, or, he was sort of an anti-hero Black guy, and there's always something. And I think what it is it's others telling our story. And so what we wanted to do was we wanted to tell our own story and make sure that we are represented in the exact fashion that we need to be represented in. And it's always been important for me. So it's coming from a place of sincerity. When I do Heru, it's not just for the sake of it. It is for my children to read and to enjoy, for your children to read and to enjoy, and for our adults as well,
Yeah, trust me, I enjoyed it just as much as any kid would enjoy it. So, for sure, man. I was hyped, man. I'm like, yo, when is book 4 coming out again? Like,
yeah.
You know, I was hyped, man. So definitely, man. Yeah, I am gonna be following, J Beyond Comics and all your future
Boom,
endeavors because I'm definitely a fan now. You know,
boom.
but before we get too deep into the comics, man, there's a beginning to everything. And before we get into that too, like you are our first guest from the UK, and
All right,
I
all
do
right.
want to gain an understanding of Black people globally. So there are some I think misconceptions about Black people in the UK, and I wanted to clear a few of that a few of those things out before we get started. So can you tell us a little bit like about what life is like for Black people in the UK? And there is this whole concept that Black people in the UK are not knowledgeable about Black history. They're not knowledgeable about race and racism, and they don't really know as much, and they're kind of docile. So, is that fact or is that fiction? Like,
Man,
talk to
yeah,
us.
you know what it is? It's a massive misconception. And, I have been fortunate enough to be able to travel throughout America, and I've been doing it for a long time.
Hmm.
I think the first time I went to the States was probably about 13 or 14. My mum took us to Florida to Disney World.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that was kind of the first introduction. I remember when I was there, someone said, they got Black people in England, like, yeah, lots of. And so yeah, there is this misconception that, that I think one of the problems that our American cousins have got is that they think that, unfortunately, because of Hollywood and because most of the slave stories and a lot of the what we would call the Black dialogue that is always internally, it's within the borders of the United States of America, and so
Right.
it doesn't bring in the South American story, it doesn't bring in the Caribbean story, it doesn't bring in the Black British story or the Black European story, and so and all of our stories are intrinsically linked, and I think that's,
Absolutely.
yeah, so that's part of the problem is that, slavery, realistically, actually, that whole thing started out of those Europeans. 1492, Columbus makes his journey out to the Americas, and that's where this whole thing triggered this whole idea of enslaving first of all the Native Americans, and then bringing the Africans, and so on and so forth. And so there were different slave ports.
Hmm.
Jamaica was a stop off. So the vast majority of from after the Second World War, the Jamaica, which is where my parents are from, but Barbados and most of the Caribbean islands were British colonies,
Mm.
and the again intrinsically linked to the whole American slave system. It was the exact same system. It was just another stop. So those slave ships would stop off, drop off some of those slaves in America, in the Caribbean, and then move on to the United States, the southern states, and drop off there. And so there was that whole movement that was happening.
Hmm.
And once Jamaica got its independence in the 1960s, Jamaica very much saw itself as a part of the British Empire. And so after the Second World War, when Britain had been bombed to pieces by Germany, they went over and they invited the Caribbean people that were there to come to the UK to help to rebuild. And they call the mother country needs you. And basically, yeah, a lot of us. So my grandparents were invited here. 30 days on a ship to get here. And when they got here, they were faced with violent racism. They were
Wow.
faced with absolute. My gran. You speak to my grandma. My gran would say, if she could have walked it home, she would have done. First of all, it was leaving Jamaica, sunshine, beautiful rivers, and to come to England in the winter, freezing cold. They used to have this thing called smog back then, which was like fog mixed with coal, soot from the chimneys, and it would
Hmm.
make the sky black. And I remember
Really?
my grand saying, like, it was almost like someone had stolen the sun, when they got off the boat, and, just a really horrible experience for them. There would be signs up in the windows, no dogs, no blacks, no Irish,
Mm.
so they couldn't go into certain stores, they couldn't rent certain places. And remember now, these people were invited. And
Right.
so,
Yep.
we were invited, and they were told there would be a warm welcome, and so on and so forth. And the first ship, HMS Windrush, SS Windrush, that came to the Caribbean with about came from the Caribbean with about 500, the vast majority from Jamaica, but also from Trinidad, from Barbados, and so on and so forth. And they basically had to make a living for themselves here, make a life for themselves here. And so we became very much connected to the American struggle because of what was happening in the UK and the racism that we were facing in the UK. We very much became connected to the whole civil rights movement, and and so we had Black Panthers over here. We had there was a guy over here called Michael X who met with Malcolm, and just became sort of just enamored by Malcolm and Malcolm's message, and so on and so forth. And so everything you have in the States, we have here, but just on a much smaller scale, because in the United States of America, a census probably about 2001 said Black Americans are about 85 million. It's probably a lot more than that, but they like to play it down.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so when you're looking at 85 million people in the UK, we're in a population. The entire United Kingdom is 68 million. Yeah, Black America is 85 million. The entire population of the UK is 68 million, and Black Britain make up 2.2 million of that. So we are an ethnic group here, whereas you guys are a race. Yeah,
Gotcha.
And that's the difference. And so it slaps different when you've got 85 million people backing you. You guys can have rappers that are only big in Texas and are multi-millionaires, and they are not known anywhere else in the world. That doesn't work here because there's such a small a number of us, and we're concentrated in very small pockets around the country. So there are places literally in Britain that you'll travel to and you will not see Black people. Fact. A lot of us are concentrated in London, which is where I'm from originally. And then you've got places like Manchester, Leeds, Liverpool, Birmingham. Then outside of that, you're not seeing that. And so I find that when you're in a smaller community, you get more into your roots, you get more into your heritage, you get more into being Black. Oppressed groups tend to cleave more to their Blackness. And so you will find that, especially the Londoners, we are very Black aware, we're very Black conscious. A lot of us, because we connect back directly to the Caribbean, people like Marcus Garvey, Bob Marley, that kind of narrative, we are very much into that side of things. We've got that kind of upbringing. And then in the 80s, there was a massive influx of people coming from mainland Africa. So we've got a large Nigerian population here, Gambian, South Africans, Zimbabwe. There was a massive influx of those from continental Africa. And by and large, we kind of just get along and just kind of make it make sense. Of course, there are those tribal differences, that Caribbeans have with Africans and vice versa. But by and large, we kind of just get on with it. And what's come out of that is what I call Black British culture. And so we, the Black British, so I'm a Black British with Jamaican heritage. I have friends that are Black British with Nigerian heritage, but we have more in common because we've created our own thing with the kind of music and clothing and so on and so forth. We've created our own culture. So I will have more in common with my Black British Nigerian friends than they will with their own cousins in Nigeria, and then I would with my own cousins in Jamaica. Do you get it? So we've got our own kind of vibe going. But I think the major difference between our American cousins and us is numbers. You guys have got bigger numbers, but we are very much locked into and have a greater understanding of your struggles. We know about Sojourner Truth, and we know about Harriet Tubman, and we know about Denmark VC. We know about Nat Turner. This is all we're in on all of that. Obviously Garvey was one of ours, but then obviously we've got our own Black heroes like Michael X and so on and so forth that were from here, that probably you guys wouldn't know about. And so I guess arguably we're more because we've got your stuff because it was so well broadcasted. And one thing that I think America has been fantastic at doing is our American cousins have been very good at the media machine and both publicizing their struggles and their successes. You know, when I was living in Thailand, one of the beautiful things for me was anywhere I went, you know, yeah, you are Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan, come and buy from me. You, 50 Cent, come. And I just thought, wow, you know, it was, and it was positive. You know, it wasn't the sort of people following you around the store, you know, because you're black. It was people inviting you into their store because you were black. And it was that association with Black America. And I think that's one thing that, you know, us the world over need to appreciate our American cousins for, is as much as comes, you know, you guys, you know, with the hood shit and the Crips and the Blood shit has been a bad advert. With the successes, you've also been a fantastic advert for Black people. So it's kind of, we've had to take the rough with the smooth, but it is something that needs to be appreciated and acknowledged, I think.
Yeah, man, it's interesting because you don't really hear too many people talk positively about you know, black the representation of black people globally, but there is some positive in all the negative, you know what I mean? So that's important, man. And your story, man, about just the history of Black Britons it sounds familiar, sounds similar, you know. So a lot of these stories are global, you know what I'm saying, in regards to the way that white people have handled you know, Black people and dispersing them in different places and bringing them in for the work. That sounds familiar, right? Like bringing them in, come fix up our place, come do the work, and you know, and at the same time we'll remind you that you are not us, you know, like that's the story of the world when it comes to us, you know. So that is very, very similar. And yeah, that is interesting, man, just to hear the similarities and the historical component of it all and everything, man. So thank you for that. And listeners too, like if you want to learn more, Jason, your YouTube page I think is enlightening as well, because you share, you know, some of the history and culture of you know, Black Britain. So what is your YouTube channel for those that want to learn more?
For the Culture TV. That was For the Culture TV. We're gonna start that program back up. We kind of stopped it during the lockdown, during COVID and stuff. We couldn't get access to the studio, so we want to start that back up probably at the end of summer. So probably about September, we're gonna start that back up, because that was just one of those ones that a lot of these podcasts that we see go out are always fueled with negativity. And when I say negativity, it's like gossiping. It's
agreed.
You know,
and those are the ones that everybody wants to, like,
then,
you know.
And that's the truth, man. And that is what everyone wants to kind of log into. And so we just wanted to do something a bit different. We wanted to kind of we wanted to interview people too, but we also wanted to be able to share some knowledge and just hope, you know, the Bible says, my people perish for lack of knowledge. And I think that's the truth, you know. There's lots of truths in, you know, I always say the Bible's not a book of facts, but it's a book of truths. And I feel like that is a truth out of there, is that our lack of knowledge. And so for me, I just wanted to find ways of imparting knowledge, but still kind of having fun with it, and still kind of, you know, bringing in little guests and stuff and people that are well known, you know, in our country, and kind of bounce it that kind of way. And just always have, I always want to try and have a positive bent on anything that I do. You know, it's really important for me. I mean, even the film that I made when we shot Naked Poet in 2010, I had the choice of making a film called In My Neighborhood, which was, you know, a gangster thing, you know, shoot 'em up. And I just thought, you know what, I had to think long and hard. And even though I'd have probably made a lot more money doing the shoot 'em up, I just thought, you know what, let's just not the way that, it's just not me. And, you know, above all else, to thine own self be true. And so I just thought, you know what, let me just go with the road less traveled, I suppose. So we wanted to put out something about romance and about relationships and, you know, Black love, and just show Black beauty on the screen. And I guess it's a reflection of how I see myself. You know, I see myself as a beautiful Black man, and I see beauty in myself. I see beauty in my race. You get what I'm trying to say?
Yes, sir.
I don't ever want to put us in a light where we don't look beautiful. That's the long and short of it. You know? I
love it.
We got so many other people doing that to us already.
Yes, yo,
you know,
man.
So yeah, that's kind of like that's the vibe. You know, that's the vibe. So yeah, I feel like so yeah, For the Culture TV. Those are up on YouTube. But yeah, like I say, we're gonna revisit that. We're definitely gonna revisit that project.
Yeah, I'm loving it, man. I've been tuning in and just learning about the history of you know, of Britain in the lens of Black folk, super important. And like you said, man, like you were telling me before, man, like just content creation, like the work that you know, I'm doing is important, but that work I think right there is important for the world, because I don't see that many avenues to learn about certain regions that don't get really, you know, like certain regions in which the only thing that you can learn is the white history, but not like the Black connection and the Black history and culture. So I think your YouTube channel is doing that. So I appreciate that, man.
No doubt, man. Thank you, my bro. And I think that's one of the things we've got to understand. We've got to understand. You know, people always say, you know, that breakdown of the word history, his story, and we need to tell our story, because I think it's Professor Maulana Karenga says that history is the struggle and record of a people trying to create the world in their image and after their likeness. And I love that definition of history, because that is what it is. It is the struggle and the record of people trying to create the world in their likeness and after their image. That's history. Right. Yep. And so we've got to recognize that creating history for ourselves, it's the white man's job is to put out his story, because it's his story. And so it's our job to put out our story. And I think we lose that. We lose that because we so focus on his story and trying to fit into his narrative and trying to fit in his place in history, not understanding that this dude has only just come along. You know, he just come along, you know, and got himself, and it's through a freak accident. You know, we introduced the white man to gunpowder technology, and it's us introducing, we were only using it for fireworks. You know, the Chinese introduced it to us. They were using it for fireworks. Off of the coast of Namibia was probably where the first interaction took place between the Chinese, where they've been trading with us for centuries. They introduced us to the gunpowder technology. We introduced him to it, and he weaponized it. And it's through the weaponizing of gunpowder technology that brought him from a side character on the world stage of history to a centerpiece. And he's managed to maintain that. And you know, and we're going back just before medieval times, because medieval Africa was a thriving metropolis, and this idea of jungle culture for Africa is nonsense. You know, it's nonsense. Some of the most beautiful medieval buildings, you go to places like Mali, go to places like Ethiopia, and you'll see architecture that Europe still hasn't caught up with. You know, they're still fascinated by architecture in Ethiopia, Lalibela. Where they've got stone churches literally carved inside the mountain. So they've actually carved it out of, you know, that was medieval Africa.
You sure aliens didn't do that?
Well, they tried to say that. That's what happens, you know. So, you know, even outside of Egypt, you know, medieval Mali, medieval Nigeria, Songhai Empire, Ghana, you know, our stuff was crazy. You know, and during this time, you know, the white man was fighting the bubonic plague and they were dying off. As a matter of fact, it was that which led him to come to Africa. Those two things, the fight with the Muslims or the Ottoman Empire, and looking for food because they had run out of everything. And it was that journey that came and they saw the wealth of Africa and so on and so forth, which changed the narrative. But yeah, we've got to just recognize who we are and our place in history. And I think once we recognize that, we'll be able to kind of move back into the correct place where we're supposed to be.
Agreed. Definitely. Man, we could talk about this for ages and ages, man, but let's get into your story,
Yes,
Jason, and your coming of age, and your, in every hero story, they have that, the beginnings of that person and some of the trials and tribulations and what it took to get them to have, their superpowers and this and that. So what can you share with us, like your beginnings, and how you were able to establish your comic book writing superpowers, man? So I think starting off from childhood is important, man. So
yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I've always had a really good memory from as far back as I can remember. I've always been, when I grew up in the church, grew up with mom, grew up in the church. Dad wasn't about. Dad had actually left and gone back to Jamaica probably when I was about 3 or 4. And so, yeah, grew up with moms. My mum got married probably when I was about maybe 5 or 6 to my stepfather. So he was about for a little while.
Mm.
And we lived in what you guys would call the projects. We call them housing estates.
Mm.
And so we lived in a housing estate in an area called Brockley, which is, now it's been gentrified, interestingly. But when we were growing up was I wouldn't call it the hood, but it was a hood. We were right next door to what they called the ghetto, which was an area called New Cross, and we're literally walking distance from there.
Right.
So, it all used to go down, man, on the projects. You know how it is, burnt out cars, drug addicts, the whole 9 yards. It used to go down. And so my mum was a very, very, very protective mum, always wanted us in the house and all the rest of it. And I was quite an adventurous youth, wanting to always be out and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And so she got us into the church, and we were at church all the time, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but there was always something going on. And so that is what established my peer group, were a lot of my church friends. And I always say this to parents when they're talking about getting their children. Parents need to learn how to control their children's peer groups by them using their own friends and those children. The church was brilliant because there were so many kids my age, and my mum knew all of their mums. And so if I'm with Simeon, my mum can pick up the phone and phone Simeon's mum,
Right.
pick up, And so I think that our, parents need to understand that controlling your children's peer groups is by finding like-minded parents, and befriending them, And so you've got that interaction, that link. Oh, I'm going over to such and such's house. You can pick up the phone and my son, my daughter's in a safe place. And so that's what mum was kind of like. And I was going to Sunday school, and I remember going to the newsagent, which is where they sell newspapers and sweets and stuff. And I remember seeing, I think it was the Mighty Thor. It's the one where he fights this character called the Crusader. Right. I remember it very clearly. I think it's issue number 331, but don't quote me on that. And I remember thinking, I want that, and my mum bought it for me. And it was just, I don't know what it was about. It just captured me, man. I was just like, yo, I just loved it, man. I think because I was already, because of Sunday school, we used to, read the golden text and read the Bible. And in the church, we use the King James version of the Bible, so it's Old English. And the Mighty Thor speaks in Old English.
Yeah.
Thou whence hence, thine thee. And so I just kind of had that vibe with it, man. I just enjoyed it, man. And that was it, man. I was just collecting. That started me off collecting comic books and just falling in love with those stories, those superheroes. But
were you one of those kids with like a heavy collection, man? Like, what was your collection?
Bro, my collection was crazy. Still is, man. I've got, thousands of comics.
Wow.
Thousands. I mean, I've got cupboards full and suitcases full. Just the other day, my mum called me up actually and said, I found a cupboard full of your comics. What do you want me to do with them? Because they're taking up too much room. And I had forgotten about those bad boys. I had to get over there sharpish. I said, Ma, we'll never speak again if you throw them away. So
yeah, you know what, man? Like comic books, some of them, like you save those and you keep it new, man. Like you might get like $10,000 for like.
Listen, I've got some gems like that. I've got some number ones, and I've got some good stuff, man. Believe me. And I think that's another important thing that I'm sure we'll talk about later. But a lot of Black children are into what is called hedonistic play, where it's running, skipping, charging, basketball, sports, and they're not into other kinds of play, comic book collecting, stamp collecting.
That's going away, man.
Right, and things like that. And those things teach us about asset appreciation, And I was one of those kids that was into putting my comic books in the dust cover and making sure that, we used to board them as well. We used to board them, put them in the dust cover. And then when we got a certain amount, I used to turn a Kellogg's cornflakes box inside out and then stick it back together. The other, so you've got the plane and then write what comics are in there and put it in there. And asset appreciation, in time, these will be worth something. I need to keep them new. And so, that was me, man. My comic collection, it got fierce. And what it also did was it introduced me to another peer group, a kind of nerdy peer group, that was just into talking about comic book stuff. And they weren't into bad things. They weren't into, robbing and stealing or none of that. And I kind of had that in me, you know. I kind of had that element in me, and there was always, they show you that depiction of an angel and a demon. I think in a Native American, they talk about the two wolves. Which one are you going to feed? And I suppose that vibe was in me because it was right on my doorstep. The youths that were doing it, the drug dealing, the fighting, the violence, the guns, and all of that was on my doorstep. And I do believe that being a part of another peer group that were into comic books and superheroes and, video games and that sort of stuff kept me away from fully immersing in that life, which, in reflection was a good thing. It really was. And so one of the things that always stuck out to me was all of my favorite characters from the Mighty Thor, Silver Surfer, even though he was silver, but when he was originally Norrin Rad, he was he's a white man. Even from other planets, they're white men, like.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Superman is probably my all-time favorite hero. But all of these guys, none of them look like me,
Yeah. And you made a point too. I remember in a previous interview you mentioned that you study Frantz Fanon, and he talks about a theory called schizoid play. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. So what Fanon basically broke down was that there's two kinds of play. And he said that when our Black children do not get to see themselves as the hero, as in characters that look like them as heroes, they have what's called restricted play, which is they never become the hero. So their play never involves them being that heroic figure. And then he said, or what you get is when they see the white superhero, when they're running around, and I remember this so vividly in my mind as a child. I used to put the towel down the back of my t-shirt and I used to run around as Superman, I'm flying. And what Fanon says is that in that moment, the Black child is actually identifying as that white superhero. He's identifying as that European. And what was really interesting about that was he used the example of Asterix the Gaul. Now, I don't know if you remember those comic books, but there was this group of comic books called Asterix, and it was about this guy who used to take magic potion. It made him super strong. And there's another character called Obelix. And in those books, the depiction of Black people were always slaves, big lips, bone going through the nose, leopard skin boxer shorts, and they were always carrying white people around on shields. And I mean, overly big lips, big and red, comically. And I remember being a child reading those books and laughing at those characters, not realizing I was laughing at myself because I was identifying as Asterix, the Gaul. I was identifying as this little European.
Right.
And so looking at the Black guys and, oh, look at him, look at his lips, and not realizing I was actually laughing at myself. And so that's what he calls schizoid play, when you're not even realizing that you're laughing at yourself. You're not even you're identifying as the European. And so what happens is that you as a Black individual never get to have those virtues of heroism, because you always see them as other, because they are always packaged in something that's completely different from you.
Yeah, while you're getting that together too, man, it kind of reminded me too of my own play, man, with action figures and superheroes and this and that and the third. And when I was playing, I didn't realize this until like you mentioned schizoid play. When I was playing, like the ultimate thing for me was like figuring out a storyline in my head in which, I'd be the white hero, of course, and then like I'd be sacrificing myself for the world of the universe. Like that was the ultimate story, like every time I played. And now looking back, I can see where all that came from, where the idea of the ultimate thing for me was to sacrifice myself. Like that's really interesting, man. But along with Frantz Fanon, I know Amos Wilson talked about Black children and their play a lot too, in regards to what we play with, how we play, and what we see. So
can you see that?
Yes, sir. So
right.
what you're talking about is a Black boy who's standing in front of the mirror with his cape on, and the reflection is a white Christopher Reeves Superman. So that is it.
And that is it. And so this is where we are now.
Yes. So Black Boy, Reflection is Black Panther. All right. And I think that that is a much more important, I think, self-representation. Even though I have a few issues with Black Panther within itself, but
Yes, yes.
we can't get it all, right, Jason?
But exactly that, you know, let's, and I always say, let's not make the good an enemy of the great,
Yeah.
you know, and so that's where we are with it. But that is that picture. I had to save that on the phone because that for me perfectly depicts what Fanon was talking about with schizoid play,
Yeah.
where that young Black boy is there looking up at Christopher Reeves as this great thing, and he is visualizing himself as that. And that's a massive problem in the community.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And not only that, but when we're getting, like you just mentioned, when we're getting the Black people, they are the slaves, they are the smaller roles. And I kind of wanted to get into that too, because sometimes we think that this stuff is just from a historical standpoint, but it's from a historical standpoint into today. So even some of our favorite comic books, you have Superman. There was an issue in which Lois Lane wanted to cover the plight of Black folk, so she decided to use Superman's machine to turn herself black, and because no Black people would talk to her in the Black part of Metropolis. So she does that, and you know, they
even did an issue of Superman where Superman went to Harlem, and but the Black people didn't want him there. You know, yeah. They even did an issue. I remember it. They did an issue, and it's funny because I've got a title coming out called Heru's Sixth Century, and I cover some issue one of that is gonna be interesting, man. Because
can't wait.
Issue one of that, I cover some ish in that, man. I cover some stuff in that which I just feel like, it was. I suppose it was my attack on the establishment, that some of the issues that they decided not to cover in their books, you know, things like the Klan, things like exactly that, Superman, you know, that whole going to Harlem, and you know, just these guys always being heroes, but heroes to white folk. You know, what about the Black folk? And so Heru holds them to account. Let's put it that way.
Man, I cannot wait for that one. Can't wait. But I also wanted to tackle just a few more. So that was the Superman piece. There's this older comic. I think that I can't remember the name of it, man, but it's an older comic, and the side character, I think it's from Captain Marvel, you know, has something to do with Captain Marvel, but the side character is like this blackface character with big lips. And just like you mentioned, like we see a lot of that in the older comic book, you know, world. You know, just all the way through, man. And then I know a lot of people like to, you know, say Stan Lee, man, he really brought, you know, the Black experience to the world of comics and this and that. But he created, like, you know, X-Men, and X-Men is supposed to be Malcolm X ideology. You got with Professor Xavier versus Magneto. Well, Magneto's the Malcolm X ideology, and then Professor Xavier is the Martin Luther King ideology. So we're talking about like civil rights and the mutants, but they're all white. So how that's number one. And then number two, just the way that, you know, the mutants are being represented, and the whole ideology that, you know, Professor Xavier wants to kind of like make peace with these people that are trying to kill, you know, everybody, and then, you know, Magneto is the other way around. Let's just kill them all and have a, you know, like, so I thought it was like very like a simplistic viewpoint on the civil rights era that Stan Lee tried to do. And then you're trying to make something representative of, you know, Black people in the civil rights, and all the characters are still white, you know, so it's like, what are we doing?
Exactly. And I think that's why I always say is that one of the things that irritates me about Black people is what we want to pass off the responsibility to someone else to tell our stories. It's not their responsibility. You know, it's not Stan's responsibility to tell our story. What our responsibility is to vote with our feet, vote with our dollars, vote with our pounds. You know, don't support that stuff. Support what we're doing over here telling our story, you know, and that's what's important. And what I call audience responsibility. I just feel like there's such a cop out, you know. Let's take rap music, for example. You'll get people say, you know, gangster rap is bad, it's this, it's that, it's misogynist, it's anti-black because, you know, it's nigger this, nigger that, and blah 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 blah. But yet still will buy it, yet still will play it, yet still, and then but want to point the finger at the rappers. And my thing is, no, point the finger at yourself.
Indeed.
We need to have audience responsibility. And if there's something you don't want to see, then do not support it. It's just that simple. And if there's something you want to see when it's being done the right way, support that. That's the long and short of it. And so we have got the ability, especially Black America, but I personally don't like to separate Black people. I think that we're a global people, we're a global family. And in very much the same way, we have our own internal things. That's always going to be the way, same as white people. But believe me, white people are on one page, especially when it comes to us. Yeah, and we need they're all singing from the same song sheet when it comes to us.
They call it the Voltron effect, man. They'll come together, man, if it means like subjugating some Black folk. Like, let's do it.
Trust me, let's do it, man. Like we'll discuss the problems we've got later. But right here, right now, let's do this. And we need to be on that same kind of page. And I think that what we need to do is, you know, audience responsibility is for me a massive part in Black economics, Black power, Black politics. We have to get to the point where we're not sitting here waiting for someone else. It winds me up when I see Black people moaning about what Marvel didn't do for Black people, or what Disney didn't do for Black people, or what Warner Brothers didn't do for Black people. Why they do Cyborg like that? Why they do this?
Man, I was just gonna get into Cyborg, man. Oh, you're reading my mind right now.
Forget all that, though. You understand? My thing is, listen, man, if they do it and they do a good job, thumbs up. But we should be focusing on what we're doing out here, man.
Absolutely.
Real talk. Because collectively, we've got more than enough money, man. You know, Black America alone spends more than the whole of New Zealand and Australia's GDP. Just Black America. Come on, man. We've got the money.
Well said. Well said. And the thing, too, I think about exposing some of the Black characters, sometimes we get excited about, you know, that there is just this Black character and maybe they're taking on a whole movie by themselves, or they're taking on a whole comic book series by themselves. But do we really examine the character and see, you know, who they are and what the representation of them are? And a lot of times we don't. So you look at somebody like Cyborg, who, you know, star athlete, you know, all the Black stereotypes, has a problem with his anger and aggressive male. And he has this accident and, you know, he's part man, part machine with no genitals. You know? And his best friend is a white boy who turns into a white man, Shazam. You know, like it's just playing into like all the stuff that, you know, that the stereotypes and the racism behind Black men within his character. And then the same thing, this will be the last one, Luke Cage is the same thing, man. Like you know, even from the comic book into the series, man, like from him being a hero for hire, you know, like who's a hero for hire?
Who? And I think that's the again, what I talk about is and I always say, when we let someone else tell our story, it's like me, if I was to write, you know, about Asians, you guys say Asians. When we say Asian over here, we generally mean Indians or Pakistanis or Bengalis. I know you guys, you mean what we would call Oriental, I suppose. Chinese, Japanese, so on. But if I was to write about Asians, you know for a fact I'm going to put some chopstick in there. You know for a fact I'm going to put some kung fu in there. You know, which are just stereotypes, but that's my idea of what they are like.
Exactly.
And so when you allow someone else to tell your story, they're just going to hype on the stereotypes. So Luke Cage, here we've got this guy with a big afro and a tiara and, you know, these like these wristlets that are reminiscent of slavery. And he's walking around a bright yellow shirt, skin tight jeans on, which are basically leggings, high heeled boots, walking around Harlem, punching people in the face and saying "Sweet Christmas." And that's not a blaxploitation idea of a superhero. And like you said, hero for hire. you know, and that was always the big headline for him. Luke
Yep.
Cage, hero for hire. So all the rest of the heroes are doing it out of benevolence, out of it's the right thing to do. But the black guy, yeah, he needs to be paid for this. You know, I'm not out
Exactly.
here doing. And so all of those underlying things, which is that was someone's vision of black people.
Mm,
Someone sees people as eccentric and greedy. And so they
mhm.
work that into their superhero narrative of us.
Right.
Yeah. And that's why it's so important for us to control our narratives, or you're always going to get those terrible, terrible stereotypes. And if you
Agreed.
look at War Machine, if you look at Falcon, you know, these guys are little more than butlers, to be honest. Yeah, like, you know, like War Machine's like Tony Stark's butler, Falcon's Captain America's butler, he's sidekick. So there's always this
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah. Thank you for
side,
the suit. Like, you know, like you didn't even like.
you
And I think
know,
Falcon too has a history, like he's like a pimp or whatever, and he changes, you know, whatever. But that's his like, come on, man, come on.
always, you know, there's
And
always
even
need.
those characters too, like you mentioned, they don't have any superpowers. Like Tony Stark is like his superpower is being a genius. So I think like we were talking about with the psychology, it hits the white boy that's reading it that I don't even need any superpowers. Like just me
Thank
being
you.
white and smart is enough. Like, you know, with
Batman.
characters, Batman, exactly. No superpowers, but he's taking on Superman. You
Exactly.
know, like, and
Exactly.
winning.
Just with prep work. Yeah.
Crazy,
Just
man.
prep work. And he can do all of that. And you're absolutely right that, and that's always been my biggest peeve with the black superheroes is they always had rubbish powers. Always. Always, you
Indeed,
know.
man. And that leads to like just the importance of the work that you are doing, man, changing the narrative and changing the script. So I do want to get into like how
Yes,
it
sir.
originally came about. And you know, I know like you had a little stint in which you know, well, you could talk about it in which you went to prison for a bit, man. So can you talk to us about that experience and then you transitioning into thoughts and ideology and writing of the comic
Ye-
Heru?
Yeah, I mean, so basically, I went to prison for possession of a firearm. So in Britain, all handguns, all pistols, hand pistols, they're illegal.
Yeah. You know
There's
what? I didn't even think about that. Because I went to England before and then like on the news, it was like talking about just all the stabbings and the history of stabbings. And I'm like, why are people stabbing each other so much? Like, this is weird. Like, and then I came across your story and I learned that, you know, handguns were not legal in England.
yeah,
So it makes sense, man.
yeah. So we don't have nowhere near the gun problem that you will have in America because guns are just not accessible here. They're
Yeah.
very you know difficult to to get hold of because there was a blanket ban on all handguns. So things like rifles and shotguns you can get a license for in the UK. Generally, people like farmers, gamekeepers, you know, those kind of guys will have that type of firearm, but anything outside of that completely illegal in this country. But obviously they still come in.
Right.
And so having a firearm in this country, if you've got possession of a firearm in this, you've got it's an automatic 5 years if you get caught.
Man.
And automatic 5. There's no ifs,
Oof.
buts, no maybes. That's the minimum. You starting out at 5 and you're moving up, and the cutoff is 12, and that will
Wow.
depend on the circumstances, i.e., was it ready to go? I.e., did you have ammunition with it? You know, can they add intent to endanger life to the charge?
Mhm.
Fortunately for me, it was just possession of the firearm, and because it was dismantled as well, there was no intent. So obviously, it was not going to be used in anytime soon. But just having it, and so I got sent to a place called Belmarsh, which is what we call a Category A prison, which would be the equivalent of your Supermax. And I was there for about a year, waiting trial. The trial took ages to come together because it was very, very involved.
Now I know like what a supermax in the United
Mhm,
States is like. So,
mhm.
man, like, are we talking about the same thing? Is it different in England?
So your prison population, your penal system out there is a lot harsher than ours here. I mean, ours is serious. Don't get it twisted. It's not a walk in the park by any stretch of the imagination.
Right.
One of the major differences, I would say, that anytime I've watched, and this is just from watching prison stuff from America, there is
Mhm.
a real massive gay presence in the prison, you know, men getting raped and all this. That doesn't happen in the UK, man.
Oh,
that
okay.
that is few, if at all, because there is a real stigma. The prison system is very homophobic. Yeah. So even if there's a rumor that you're gay, worst way that you try to rape someone, you would get weighed in, you will get smashed up, you're likely to get, you know, stabbed or what. That's going to be a problem. So generally, so that's one of the things that we see, that when we're looking at American prisons, we're like, what's wrong with them? You know, like what they do, like that is just, that's a no.
That is interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's a no in the UK. Believe me, that shit does not fly. Like I said, there might be, you know, cases, but that is B. That's just not the thing. Like nah. So and that's always been an anomaly to me. Like even when I was away, I read when I was in prison, I read Monster. I read an R.I.P. Monster Cody Scott. But I read his book when I was away. And there was a lot of that in when he, you know, his prison stories and, you know, guys raping guys. And I was just like, yo, Americans, these guys, they're different, you know, like, what are you like? So that's one of the big differences. But no, the category A prison here is 23-hour lockdown. So you're pretty much banged up for 23 hours of the day. You get like 40 minutes in the morning and you get like another, I think whatever it is, 40 minutes or something less association time to make a couple of phone calls, have a shower, then you're back in the cell unless you've got a job. And you have got some of the worst of the worst. That's the truth, man. Like even when I was there, we had like, I think he's Abu Qatada. We had a lot of those, you know, terrorist guys there and all the rest of it. So it gets serious in there, man. You know, all of the fightings and the stabbings and the, you know, it all goes down. So it's not a walk in the park by any stretch of the imagination. But no, when in comparison to some of the Supermax prisons that I've seen in the States, we're not there yet. We're definitely not there yet, you know. But believe me, it's not out of all of the penal systems in Europe, I would probably say that the Britain's is the worst. And what we have, we don't have the segregation in the same way that you guys do. A bit. You know, with the racism, so you've got like the white, like, you know, you guys have got like, you know, the Aryan nation types and or should I say how it's depicted? I don't know if that's an accurate depiction, but you've got all of that. In the UK, we sort of have it, but nowhere near as blatant and as bad. You know, the brothers kind of stick together, but there's not that overt racist overtone where a man's going to be walking around with a swastika on his chest and, you know, this is a white only area. There's none of that. There's none of that. Like,
gotcha.
And to be honest, unfortunately, there's a disparity. There's the prison population is overpopulated with black guys compared to the population. So like I said, we're only about 2.2 million, but we represent 50% of the prison population, which is crazy.
Yeah, it is. Wow.
Which is crazy. And that's because of all of the racial injustice in the justice system and so on and so forth. We're likely to get longer for the same crimes as our white counterparts and all of that. But the flip side to that is that our presence in the prison is very much respected. Let's put it that way. Our presence in the prison as a black men is very much respected.
Right.
And generally speaking, we've got a bigger problem with each other than we have with anyone else in the prison system. That was my experience. You know, we're more likely to be fighting each other, unfortunately, than having a problem with any racists or anything like that. They generally know their place, if I'm going to be honest.
Gotcha.
Again, from my experience.
Yeah, of course, man. And like, I'm just thinking, like, you know, you created like a masterpiece in your head while you were locked up.
Well,
like,
so that was it. I read a quote, and it was Nelson Mandela, and he says, "I'm not going to count the days. I'm going to make the days count." And that just rung to me, and I thought, what can I do while I'm here? And I've got all of this time. You know, when I got sentenced, I got 6.5 years. I thought, I've got all of this time. What am I going to do? Am I going to count the days? Because that's what we do in jail. You literally have got the calendar on the wall and you cross through at the end of every night before you go to bed. And you just go through, crossing through the calendar. And I thought, am I going to do that, count the days, or am I going to make these days count? And I just made a decision. And so one of the decisions was, I had all these ideas shooting around my head anyway. I was writing scripts from before I'd gone to prison, but now it was like, let's sit down, let's focus, and let's get this done. And so I wrote 7 scripts when I was out there.
Wow.
Heru was one of them when
7.
I was there. 7 scripts, yeah, when I was there. Yeah.
Were they all comics or other stuff?
So originally I'd actually written Heru as a live action, and then kind of just scaled it back to turn it into a comic book, because I realized I'd need millions of dollars to make it the way that I'd want to make it. And so I thought, okay, cool, let me turn that into a comic book. I'd always wanted to do a comic book anyway, and then we'll just create a little buzz around it, get a little following going, and then start to move it up to series and live action movie. I wrote something called The Evangelist, again, another superhero thing. I started off The Age of Heroes and Villains, just sketched out the ideas for The Age of Heroes and Villains. I wrote,
and that's your comic book universe right there.
Yeah, that's the universe right there. I'd written a feature film called William's Law. Yeah, just loads of stuff, man. I was just banging out.
That's incredible, man.
Yeah, and what I would do is that on association, which was really cool, is that on association, our cell would be open, and a few of some of the guys would come into the cell and we'd eat in the cell, and bring our food into the cell and sit down, and I would sit on the thing and read the stories, to the guys, and I'd kind of like play all the different roles. So I'd do the different voices and stuff, and it had them really locked in, entertained, and I thought, well, it's definitely working, and I had them, blah, 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 yo, you finished that thing yet? When's the next part of that coming? So that kind of, that kind of vibe was going on. So I thought, cool, we got something, we've definitely got something here.
Yeah.
And I also started I've always been a great reader, but what I thought my plan was to read the entire library. So I was going to start at A and literally just read every single book.
Get your Malcolm X on, yes sir.
Yeah, just all of them, And I was doing that thing because I saw that in X. So I was doing I was writing out the dictionary. Yeah, so I was doing that as well. I was writing the dictionary out at nighttime, and then I'd go and get the books and stuff in the day. And believe me, I didn't get far. I don't even think I got through the whole A section, because it was crazy, because we were doing, I was reading everything, from cookbooks to just every single book, because it made it easier then as well. I didn't have to think, what am I going to read? Right? It was just the next one that I hadn't read in the A section. Yeah, just get everything. And yeah, didn't even scratch the surface.
Did you get to B?
I think I got to C. I think I got up to
that's impressive.
I think I got up to the C section, because we moved to another prison, and then what happened was other things were kind of crossing over. So the whole Game of Thrones series came out, and I was like, I've got to read that. I got all of those and kind of went through all of those. So I was also reading other stuff, but that was the plan. And then I did lots of courses, because there are a lot of available for education stuff. So I started engaging in a lot of the courses in there and did about 19 different courses. So I just decided that I can't affect what's happening outside. I can only affect what's going on here. And whilst here, I'm going to make the best of this bad situation, and kind of just really focused on just getting the craft ready, so that when I got home, I could just hit the pavement running like a nosebleed, man. I just wanted, and you got that hunger because you're trying to catch up for those years that you had lost. Yep. And so that's where Heru was birthed, man. When I came home, I had the script ready, and it was just then to kind of just find an artist, which was difficult. But
what was that process like?
Oh man, one of the,
because you mentioned too that you're not really a great artist yourself, and I think that's important too. Like when you're creating content, that we're not going to be able to do everything, like with the content creation, right? So finding somebody that can match your, what it is that you're looking for, or somebody that has an expertise, and that's what you did with, your illustrator. So how'd you go about doing that?
Well, bro, it was that is probably the most difficult part, is finding the artists, because artists I found are very complicated individuals. They themselves real hard work. Meeting someone that understands your vision and doesn't want to kind of take over the project was also difficult, and do it their way. And I've got a very specific way of working. So what I do is I draw out the concept pictures, not very well, I might add. Let me see if I've got one around here somewhere that I could show you. Oh yeah, not doing. So this is what the concept pictures look like.
Okay, it looks like those how to draw like books, like wait.
It, exactly.
Yeah.
So what I did was I got that book, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Universe Way
Mm,
by Kirby and Stan. And I got that book and read it and learned how to draw, to just understood how to make the images moved,
right.
face the right way and so on. And so what I'll do is I would draw out all of the concepts, scan it, send it over to the artist, and then he would then just, so he's got it there already, with the script, so it's got it there. And a lot of artists are just used to getting a written script and then they do what they want to do. And so we kind of
Like, nah, this is exactly how I want it, bro.
this is how I want it, bro.
Yep.
This is how I want it. And then what happened was, I met a guy on the internet after going through a lot of these freelance sites and Guru and Fiverr and all these different sites. And I met a guy, he was in America, he was in Texas, and for book one, and he got it. And he actually said, this is easier, actually, because you've already I can see what you need.
Right.
This is much easier for me. So I was like, brilliant. So then he had a colorist in Australia. So it was like UK to the US, from the US to Australia, and then back to the UK to proof. And so it was all of that. And these are the wonders of technology, man. Had I come about in a different time, it would have been a different process, I'm sure, and a lot more difficult, especially to self-publish. But the wonders of technology is that, I had all of this interaction globally and was able to piece it all together and to pull it off. And so that was book one. But the guy got really sick. Yeah, the guy in Texas, Kevin, he became unwell and couldn't continue with book two. And so again, I had the process start again for book two, searching for an artist. And I found a guy in Italy called Andrea, who done a really fantastic job for book two. I really liked, and again, he had that ease of working. He found it quite difficult to start with, working in my style, but now the synergy is there, and he kind of gets it now. So I can literally just send him a whole book for him to just crack on with, and I think one of the things as well is knowing how to accept good advice, because oftentimes they would advise me differently, and it's not about being an imperial dictator. Even though it's your vision, if someone can make your vision better, you've got to allow them to do that. And so working with artists is hard to find the artists, and once you find them, I think the balls, it starts to roll and it starts to get a bit easier. But I like to talk about that just as an encouragement to people that have ideas and think that because they can't draw, they can't do it. You don't need to, you don't need to be a fantastic artist. You don't need to be Vincent van Gogh. You don't need to be Kirby. You don't need to be Todd McFarlane to be able to put together a comic book. If you've got the idea, you've got the storyline, and you know how you need it to look, you'll be able to find and partner with people to make the vision come to fruition.
Indeed, man. So what was that, your whole team right there? Just you and the illustrator, or did you have more people on your team after
So
that?
yeah, no, just me, the illustrator, and the colorist. And generally speaking, it's usually a trichotomy. It's usually a trinity, the three. Even now on the Age of Heroes and Villains, same thing. Me, the illustrator, and the colorist. Yeah.
Cool. All right. I want to just to get a little sneak peek of Heru, because I think that we're not going to get it until we get it, until we get a little piece. So can you tell us a little bit about Heru, some of the superpowers and kind of who he is? And then I remember in the previous program, you kind of got into a little bit, like a little snippet of each book. And I thought that was a great, intro into your universe, that you created, man. So would you mind doing that for us?
Yeah, I mean, so basically, Heru, for a start, Heru was an Egyptian god, the son of Asur and Alset. The Greeks called them their European names. What the Greeks kind of put on them was Osiris, and so Heru is known as Osiris, the Greek god Osiris. That's the African god Heru. And I think it's important for us to understand, it's important for us to use the African names. I think is really, really important. So for me, that was really important to make sure that I use the African names to kind of bring that in. Now, our English word hero, the root word for it is actually Heru. And that's why it was really important for me to use Heru. And the first book was the first hero, because for me, all heroes are birthed out of that. Yeah, all heroes are birthed out of that understanding.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, so that's why it was like to kind of bring it back. And so what it is, that the story is really of an African slave that was working in a plantation in the South. I based it in the United States, in the Southern, but he was brought in from a slave colony in Jamaica, and he was brought to the Americas, again, showing that link between the two. That, you know, the same things that were happening there were happening in the States as well.
Right.
And basically one night, a meteor hits Earth not too far from the plantation that they were on. And Heru and Akeem and a group of those enslaved Africans leave the plantation to go and see what fell from heaven, the star that fell from heaven. And when they get there, they find this meteor, and Heru touches the meteor, and he's endowed with superhuman powers. Now, what Heru didn't realize, or what none of them realized, were that meteor was actually a prison. It was a prison for an incredibly powerful being called the Demiurge, a being of complete destruction. And he had been placed there by a cosmic group called the Council of 24. 24 different worlds, different planets came together, and they created this prison because this Demiurge was just going around destroying planets, absorbing the life force, and moving on, creating havoc and destruction everywhere he went. And they found that they couldn't destroy the Demiurge, but they could trap him, they could imprison him. And so the hack was, the enchantment was that if the prison was ever damaged or destroyed and Demiurge had the ability to escape, that the power of the prison would be transferred into a worthy individual that would somehow be able to stop the Demiurge. That was the idea of it. And so Heru touching the asteroid prison kind of transferred the prison's powers into him and made him an incredibly powerful individual. And Heru's actual slave name is Toby. And that was kind of me, that was, what do you want to call, pastiche to Roots.
Yeah.
Kind of a look back to Roots. So you'll find a lot of that. But what happened is that a lot of the slaves on that particular plantation had all taken what they called original names. So they all called each other by African names.
Right.
They didn't acknowledge the slave names. And that was because Heru's best friend, Akeem, he's a reader. He knows how to read. As a matter of fact, he was kicked off of the previous plantation for teaching other slaves how to read. And so it was his knowledge that he brought to that plantation and so on, which was something that was, you know, that's a part of our history. Those things.
Absolutely, man.
On plantation.
That's the piece I appreciate about the comic, man. Just the reality, the historical, nonfiction involved in it as well.
Yeah, planting some of that information in there. And so Heru becomes, and his powers begin to grow. So basically, to cut a long story short, we move it through. In book one, it was really the origin story, how he got his powers, and kind of showing that, he this link to the messianic prophecy, because Heru gets lynched and he's underground for 3 days and 3 nights, and then resurrection moment, and so they begin to see that this was the Messiah that was promised. Heru was the Messiah that was promised, and during that, it starts the beginning of a slave revolt. The story of this risen Black Messiah starts to spread throughout all of the southern colonies, and there's revolts happening all over. So by the time we get to book 2, which is called Plantation Wars, the rumors have spread far and wide about Heru, and this mass uprising has been planned. Heru's gone off to fight. The Demiurge is now loose, and he takes up residency inside one of the overseers, and it's kind of creating that villain mixed with a previous villain and sort of making him a super villain. And I think all good heroes are only as good as their villains, And so, if you're ever gonna have a good hero, you have to have a good villain. And so, what better villain than the Demiurge, which is a representative of the devil, so to speak. This real evil destructive entity, and incredibly powerful. And so that was book 2, is Plantation Wars. And we start to see a bit more of Heru. We start to understand a bit more of the history. We start to see his powers developing. We understand that he can control things on an atomic level. We understand he's got super hearing. He's got, optic blasts, incredibly strong, the power of flight, regeneration. And so what we're doing is I'm giving him, and there's a reason, because one of the things is a lot of people, but he's OP, he's overpowered. And what they don't realize is by the time we get to book 5, Heru is almost omnipotent. He's almost all powerful. Yeah, because his powers are continuing to grow. When we get into in book 3, which is called Live Free or Die, and Live Free or Die was one of the battle cries of our ancestors, those guys that fought in the Haitian Revolution with Toussaint Louverture and Jean-Jacques Dessalines and Cécile Fatiman. One of the Vudum, Vudum was a very important part. The Vudum ritual that happened before the revolution was a very important spiritual ritual that we did before we took over and took that island. Kicked those white people's asses and sent them packing. Those that didn't get killed, that weren't executed, left. And one of the ancient African phrases within Vudum was live free or die. And it was something that the white man had to get out of us, which is why they forced Christianity into us. Because Christianity says, even if you commit suicide, you go to hell. Whereas Vudum says live free or die. And so you had many Africans that would commit suicide. They would jump over rather than live a life of slavery, because the belief was that they would be resurrected in Africa free. And so you're no good as a slave. If you're dead, there's no value. And if there is a whole religious belief, spiritual system that allows you to have ritual suicide because you're going to resurrect in Africa, we have to somehow get that out of you. We have to get rid of that system. And that's why Vudum, which was turned into the European as voodoo, was turned into evil, and it was made to seem malevolent and wicked and all to do with black magic and curses and all of this nonsense, was in order for them to put us off of using our spiritual systems and having that internal understanding, live free or die, man. And so for me, that was so important to just use that as the title of book 3, live free or die, and actually have the characters throughout the book actually using the phrase. There's a point where one of them says to Akeem, well, what if that doesn't work? He says the mission's the same, live free or die. Freedom is more important than being in bondage is no life. So it's better off being dead if you're not, rather than live a life of slavery and servitude. So book 3, Live Free or Die, is really establishing 2 things. Was establishing the lead female character, which is Cassie, who changes her name to Nzinga. And again, a kind of homage to Queen Nzinga, the great warrior queen. And also the rise of Akeem, Heru's best friend, who has a very different outlook on the slave situation, different outlook on how we should deal with white people than Heru, who is much about equality, who is much about living in peace, who is much about a peaceful coexistence, whereas Akeem is about let's do unto them what they did unto us. And so there's, both of them represent different parts of my personality and different parts of how sometimes I feel, about our racial standing in the world. There's parts of me sometimes that thinks, we just need to be on top. And then there's other times where you just think, can't we all just get along? So I suppose it's that kind of battle. Book 4, Fall of an Empire, which is coming soon, which basically is dealing with. So Heru is now ends up out of space. We won't tell you to fight the demiurge. He has to get him away from Earth, and he's gone for what he thinks is 6 days, which turns out to be 600 years. But he doesn't realize, because the time and space is very different. The space-time continuum moves a different way than it does on Earth. And so what we do is we get to see what's happening on Earth while Heru's away, and the great slave war that takes place. Book 4's just got some, I'm not even,
man. Cannot wait.
Moment, man. Believe you me, there's a moment in there where I believe that when people, especially our American cousins, read it, they're gonna be like, "Yo!" So
Man, I
anyway,
was like that on book one. I was like, yo, this is it.
there's a great war that takes place, and we win basically, you know, and and history is rewritten. The last 600 years is rewritten, and so by the time we get to book 5, which is called The Return, which is when Heru comes back, the world is a very, very different place. And what that whole thing was is in my creating Heru, I wanted to ask and answer one question: what would the world look like today if during slavery we had a Superman? That was all I set out to do. How would the world look today if during slavery we had a Superman? And so when we get back, when the return of Heru, and he's now in modern times, which is how book 5 ends, we see a very different world. Yeah, it's all changed. People's names are different. It's just different. And
That is interesting.
yeah, and Heru's not particularly, he's not over the moon about it, about the change, you know. He kind of returns on the eve of a White Lives Matters march. So you see where we're going here. It's just a very different world that we're living in. And so and what happens is book 5 is the end of the Heru saga, but it leads us into the Age of Heroes and Villains. And there's a massive incident that takes place, and they call it the Night of the Gift, and that's where many people received powers, and it's the birth of the supers and the birth of the JBN comic universe. And that was why Heru had to always be the first hero as well, because he's the first hero of that universe. So it was kind of a double thing. It was Heru as in historically the first hero. This is where we get our word from, and also he is the father of the JBN Comics universe. When we go into the Age of Heroes and Villains, we start looking at lots of different. I mean, there's lots of heroes. We've got Nova, and what I did was I kind of people that are alive that are, most of them are based on real people.
Yeah, I noticed that, man. You got like red pill and blue pill, like with superpowers. I'm like, wait, I know those guys. Wait a minute.
Yeah. And there was just a thing like, 19 Keys is in there. Red and Blue's in there. Nova, Dr. Nova Felder's in there from the stateside. And what I wanted to do was, I wanted to kind of pay homage to the work that some of these guys are doing in the community.
Right.
And also, I wanted to we are the heroes now. I want us to be the heroes now. And so from the UK, a lot of these guys, a lot of the artists, a lot of the people that are driving the culture forward with music, with art, with, I've even got guys that are financial advisors. I've turned them into superhero, like the character Banks, Banks, who can turn anything he touches to gold. He's a financial advisor, and that's what he done, a mortgage broker, and that's what he does. And so I thought, there's a girl called, she's one of the shifters, High Priestess Jatali. Again, she's a financial advisor. She wrote a book called Kids Who Bank, and it's about, for Black kids, it's about, getting us. Yeah. So Jatalia, she does Kids Who Bank, and she's based in New York as well. And so it was about kind of saluting some of the people that I know, and also people whose names kind of, a lot of the heroes that I've used, like Stormzy, for example, he's a UK rapper. It's a great name, man, for a superhero, man. Let's use that,
Absolutely,
There's another guy called Getz, he used to be Ghetto, and now it's just Getz. And I just thought, man, what a great name for someone who gets your power. So his ability is, if he holds on to you for, 5 seconds or more, he can absorb your ability for 4 minutes.
Brilliant.
You know what I mean? So it was just using the names, and there were obvious ones, like a guy called Scorcher, or, it was just using these names and creating powers based around that. And so the Age of Heroes and Villains will go on forever, man. Hopefully in years to come. I grew up in Spider-Man. My children enjoy Spider-Man. Their children, I'm sure, will enjoy Spider-Man. And so in the same way, I want, red and blue. I've got a character, red pill and blue pill. When they touch fists, they become Moreland. Moreland is this incredible, that's their surname, right? And so,
that's crazy.
That's Moreland's a crazy, powerful being, like Galactus level power, and so I just kind of wanted to also immortalize some of the stuff that we're doing and cause people to ask more questions. There's always going to be some kind of deeper link in what we're trying to do out here, with the story. So yeah, Age of Heroes and Villains is what, but there's other things, because I've got Book of Origins in there, which is, deals with our creation story. Like I said, man, I had time to write quite a bit and continue to do so.
Right.
So yeah, this is my bit for the culture.
For sure, man. And everything that you said is just, I think, extremely powerful. And I know, like, sometimes people get into content creation and they paint a picture that they know is going to sell, like with thugs and criminals or whatever it is, and just painting us in a bad light. And I think that you have to be creative and use your imagination and change the script sometimes, like fictionally, non-fictionally, like whatever it is. And I think that's exactly what you are doing in regards of mixing, like infusing both of them together into this masterpiece where we could be really proud of, and not only be proud of, like, in a fictional sense, but in a non-fictional sense, where we can have a vision of the future and then appreciate, like you said, some of the guys that are doing amazing work in our communities that we don't know. So I think that all of it is just super duper important. And you're even creating an avenue for fans to get into, like, to get a comic character as well, right?
Yeah. So what we're doing is the golden ticket edition of the Age of Heroes and Villains. I think I kept 5 slot storylines open, and I want to give the opportunity for just 5 random people, if they find a golden ticket, that they can become a superhero. They can become a part of the Age of Heroes and Villains. We'll sort of base the character on their likeness, and we'll discuss with them what superpowers they want, and as long as it works in the story, but yeah, very much. I like to do things that I would have loved to have been a part of when I was younger. So it's that Charlie and the Chocolate Factory moment. You find that golden ticket and you're in, baby.
Yes, sir.
And when we move it on to, and I really want to, when we move it on to, because the next step for me is definitely animation. That's kind of the next move that I want to make this into, an animation. I want to kickstart Black Anime, and massive at the moment, and those Asian titles are doing great stuff, and I don't see why we can't have Black Anime, man. I don't see
Agreed.
why we can't have, you know what I mean? Like, I just for me,
man, you get me excited, man.
I'm like, let's just do it, man. Like, come on, I just, yeah, man, that's the next step, man. That's the next step without a doubt, man. We're gonna get Black Anime going, and so yeah, those same people, I want them to do the voices, and I think that was another thing. I want Red and Blue to do their voices. I want, I want them to voice their characters. I want 19 Keys to voice his character. So that's where that's the direction that we're moving in.
Dope. I was thinking about doing a MasterMine comic too, man. You're like inspiring me, man. Like,
boom. That's what's up.
That is inspirational, man. A lot of the times too, like when we do these things, man, we do inspire people. I know you inspire people, and people think, well, let me just hit them up for some, like, comic book advice, or let me hit them up and ask them to make a comic for me, or let me hit them up and ask them to do a character for me. And you did one thing on your Instagram that I think is important, because I know that people will be hitting you up, and they will, like, it's so funny because with us, like, we get that kind of treatment from people, but nobody's hitting up Stan Lee talking about, can you make a comic for me?
Facts,
but
bro.
I'm sure you have been getting it. I'm sure you get it. So let's just pull it out in the forefront of what your prices are and what you charge, like, people that are interested in the work that you do, and helping out and things like that.
I mean, so at present, commissions are closed. We're doing nothing at present, only because we're behind time. So on the Age of Heroes and Villains book 1, my artist, the lead artist on the project, his younger brother died of COVID.
Oh, wow.
So it blew the project up. We were halfway through. He'd already inked half of the pages, so we tried to bring in another artist. I did a competition, I think last year, where it was Heru versus, and a guy called Alpha won the competition. He won, I think it was £500, and the opportunity to work with us in the future. So we called him in to finish the book. unfortunately, their artwork just didn't
match.
blend. Nah, it was setting off my OCD, to be honest. It was just it was too much. So we sort of wasted about 3-4 months with Alpha, and and the money as well, getting those done. And then I had to go back to the original guy and sort of say, "You ready to come back to work?" And he was like, "Man, I'm going to come back. I don't want to leave you in the lurch." And so he came back on board. So it was then revisited all those pages we'd done with the other guy and so on. So it's made the book over a year late. The unfortunate thing about that is we took pre-orders. And listen, man, you know what our people are like. Black man's late with their, "You're a scammer." I mean, some of the emails that I've had, bro, I'm like, yo.
But you got books out. It's not like, you're like promising.
Bro. But this is what I'm telling you, man. So what I did is that I offered everyone that pre-ordered. And you know what? This is what and this is what's really important, actually. And I find that we get into that a lot, is that we focus on the negative. In all honesty, I've probably had about 5 people out of probably about maybe 150, 200 that pre-ordered. I probably only had about 5, but unfortunately, those are the 5 that stick out, that have been a bit aggressive and abusive and demanding their money back, which they all got back. But the remainder have all been so supportive. I've had emails back, because I've emailed everyone explaining the situation. The book is coming. Matter of fact, the book is landing next month. The book is coming. Real sorry. This is what's happened. And most people have been like, "Bro, this isn't even about a comic book. It's about supporting the vision. It's about
exactly.
it's about having our stories told the way." So, the majority have been cool, but we have had those where it's just like drawn me out of myself. And I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, we're only having a global pandemic,
right? And then there was it was just a headache, man. But so we have been so all of I've not even really been posting that much, because all of my focus has been on getting this book done. I want it finished. I want it out, just to settle those people. And I don't think I will ever do a pre-order ever again. Because when you've got people's money, bro, it's different. Like they think that they can talk to you different. It's just, my G, it's different. And I'm not that customer services guy. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not.
I feel you, man.
Him, bro. So it's like, yo.
Especially when you're making a quality product and you just like, all right, guys, just give me a little bit. This is what happened.
I'm trying to, come on, man. I'm trying to make history happen out here. Like, come on. So and so at the moment, but generally speaking, we can usually do a character. So if someone wanted a standalone character, it'd be between $150 and $200 for a standalone character. I always give 3 drafts. So because usually what happens is someone you get it and then you go, okay, but can you add this and can you do that? And that happens. So I usually say 3 drafts. So it gets to go backwards for 3 times, and then we're now looking at more money, because this is taking time doing this. You need to have your idea mapped out as best as you can for us to bring that to life. If someone wants a comic book, generally speaking, I do 52-page comic books, but that's just me, because I'm very verbose. There's a lot of dialogue in the comics. I'm storytelling. So the comics generally go quite long, but averagely comics are like 22 pages. So for a 22-page book, it's probably about $5,000 US dollars. For a 50-page book, you're looking around $10,000 US dollars.
And I never even really knew comic books cost that much, man.
Oh man, wow. It's crazy, bro. And believe you me, that's me being generous, because the truth of the matter is, to piece it all together, especially if you don't work like me. That's kind of how I work, because I already know what I want to see and do. And that's just from my years of making films and doing filmmaking. I understand working within a frame and telling the story within a frame. I mean, just a very quick story, but I sat with a good friend of mine's dad. He's about 8 years old, and he was a professional photographer. And he said to me, Jason, he brought a picture, and he said, what's this? And I said, it's a frame. And he's like, okay, cool. So that's the outside. And he said, and it's a picture of a wedding couple. And he says, what does this tell you? And I was like, they're in love, they're happy, they're smiling, it's a sunny day. And he said, exactly. He said, there's your story. So what you've got to understand is you're telling stories inside the frames. That's all filmmaking is. Telling stories inside of frames. So get your frame and know the story you want to tell within that window. And so I've always kind of that has always been just my go-to guide whenever I'm making those little boxes. What story am I telling inside this frame, inside this little box? But not a lot of people understand that. And so the work that would go into creating a comic book for someone, but the product that they will get at the end will be, you know, perfect bound, full color. So you're going to get a product like that, which is going to be perfect bound, which is going to be, you know, full color.
Beautiful.
Yeah, just real quality, you know, real quality finish. We don't play, man, because we don't play with it. And the reason why is because I look at Marvel and DC as my competition. That's what I'm
that is so important, man. That is so important
me?
because when we get into like these lanes, it's like we just want to be like, all right, I'm a black comic book maker. Like this is just black. But what about there's competition out there that's not just black? So how do you compete with that? So that's super important, man.
Exactly, man. So I have to come with a product that's on their level. So I took one of my favorite comic books, Thanos Quest, and I looked at Thanos Quest and I said, I want my book to look like this. And I sent that to the printer and I said, this is what I need it to look like. And the guy was like, yeah, we can do that.
Super important, man. And then speaking of that too, man, I remember growing up, man, I used to love the Marvel encyclopedias, like where you look at the different characters and you see all their powers and what they do and their storyline. Are we gonna get
100%, bro?
Yes.
100%, bro.
Yes.
Listen, man, if you look on my page, I've got an Instagram page called The Age of Heroes and Villains, and I kind of do it there, just give you a little backstory.
Yes.
That is what it's going to look like. You're going to have the character, you're going to have the origin story, their strength level, the whole 9 yards. I think I have it in Heru book 1. I did it for Heru right at the back. Book 1 here. I did that Heru fact file.
Yes.
Down, and it was very much reminiscent of the Marvel universe. I love those, man.
Man, I cannot wait, man. I cannot wait.
Love those, man.
Yeah, me too, man. I cannot wait. Like, so excited, man. I'm so happy that again I ran into your work and that you're doing this amazing. Like I couldn't think of it any better myself, man. Like just the amount of information that you have in there and how it's well thought out and you planning like from A to Z. Like this is exactly I think what we need and exactly the seriousness that we need to take things like even as simple as some people might think a comic book, but understanding that this is a vision for Black boys and girls. This is a vision for us as adults. And this is a representation of us and we can just create so much out of it, man. So I do thank you for your genius, man. And all the work that you've been doing, man. I want to transition into a quick little activity to dive into you a little bit more. So this is called What's Your Favorite? Identifying a few of your favorite things. So you could keep it simple or you could elaborate if you want. So what has been kind of like your favorite thing just about comics within itself, like for you?
Storytelling, man. For me, I'm just into great storytelling. I think the world is controlled by great stories. You know, I was in Sierra Leone recently, and they were talking about the war that took place there, and just sitting with these guys and listening to these guys telling that story of, you know, how, you know, their neighboring country, Liberia, you know, the discovery of the diamonds in Sierra Leone made those guys cross over, and then 70% of the army turning against the people. And it was just and then how, you know, the British army got involved, and 10 days after the British army engaged, just 10 people, 10 soldiers, 10 of their most decorated soldiers took down the entire and stop the war, you know. And it's just an amazing story, and I just love great storytelling. So for me, any genre of, whether it be comic book, whether it be film, whether it be cartoon, anime, whatever, just great storytelling.
Got you. All right, so you are stranded on an island and you can only have 3 of your favorite comic books. What you bringing?
I'm definitely bringing Thanos Quest, books 1 and 2, without a doubt. I'm bringing. I really enjoyed Invincible recently. After watching, and I never read that before, but there was a series called Irredeemable, that I really enjoyed. So Irredeemable would probably that's two. The third one would probably be something from maybe The Killing Joke, man. Batman: The Killing
Oh
Joke.
man, that
Maybe
is
The
a
Killing
masterpiece
Joke.
right there, man. That is a
That's
masterpiece,
yeah,
man.
yeah, 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 yeah. So yeah, man,
The
The Killing
DC, I feel
Joke,
like DC is more real, man. Like sometimes
without
than
doubt.
Marvel is, man. And
Yeah,
I get a little sense of DC from the Heru, like you know
yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
where you
yeah,
keeping it a little bit more real, and it's not
yeah,
like this wishy washy. Like Marvel
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
tends to
yeah.
do that, but
Definitely,
yeah,
definitely. Especially the Batman titles, the
yeah,
Batman
yeah.
titles, and even Injustice, man. Injustice was a great series, man.
Hmm.
Injustice was a great series showing a usurpacious Superman. But I think they got that idea from Irredeemable, which was, so it's a good comic book, man.
Yeah, I
It's a
haven't
good,
looked at that. I'm gonna check
yeah,
that
it's
out. I'm gonna check that
interesting.
out. What is your favorite superpower, man?
Probably flight. I
Hmm.
just think the idea of being able to fly is just, whether you're flying like Angel in X-Men or you're flying like Superman, however you're doing it, man, just that being up in the air, soaring is just, for me, I think flight, man. And I think it's always just an amazing thing whenever you're watching a superhero flick, whether it be Heroes, the series, when Nathan Petrelli flew up in the air. There's always that breathtaking
Yeah,
thing. So I just think there's something about human flight. Whenever Superman takes off, Neo in the Matrix, there's
that's
just
true.
something about superhuman flight that is just, that's so definitely flight.
Got you, got you. You know, when I'm listening to like, oh, you talk about Heru, like I'm like going back into childhood and getting excited, man. What comic book like excites you on that level where you're like, yo, this was it for me? Like just thinking back, like I know you mentioned Thor, so anything outside of Thor?
Outside of Thor, I was a big Silver Surfer fan, man. I loved the Silver Surfers, man. I had all of them from number one, I think, to whatever it ended at. I had them all. So my Silver Surfer, matter of fact, my son was reading them recently, and I was just like, careful now. But he was going through the collection just recently. But Silver Surfer, man. I think Silver Surfer and that crossover with Silver Surfer and Thanos, great
Indeed.
memories, great
Yeah,
memories,
indeed,
man.
indeed. Favorite comic movie?
Difficult one, because I think Blade
Oh,
was
classics, classics.
serious. Yeah, Blade was serious. But my
Wesley
favorite.
Snipes doesn't get the credit, man. Oh my
He
God, like
doesn't. He
he
doesn't. He
just
doesn't.
embodied that character, man.
Oh man, and it's because a lot of people didn't really know Blade as a comic book character in that way, so they
Mm,
didn't recognize. Obviously, the fans knew, but the general public that went, they just thought it was a vampire type film, superhero thing. They didn't realize it's actually a comic book with that. But yeah, but Wesley Snipes, he encapsulated Blade in
yes.
amazing. But probably a superhero film that I've seen the most, and that's probably influenced me the most, and that I could pretty much quote it word for word, is Superman 2.
Really?
With General Zod, Ursula and Non.
I remember that one. Yeah.
And it was General Zod for me. General Zod, he just did the speeches, and I feel like they tried to make Loki very similar to General Zod in the
Hmm.
way that, in Avengers, the way that he spoke and that swagger that General Zod had from
Yeah.
Superman 2.
And
But
that's one too where you're like, is Superman gonna make it through this? Like, is he?
exactly.
You know?
Great villains, always got
Yeah.
to be great villains. So yeah,
Ah.
definitely.
So speaking of villains, I'm guessing maybe General Zod is your favorite villain. Any other ones that stand out?
Yes, Lex Luthor, but the one that Michael Rosenbaum, Smallville, his Lex Luthor was,
Ah,
for me, second to none. Even better. And I know I'm stepping on toes here, but even better than Gene Hackman's Lex
man.
Luthor, man.
Yeah, I watched the whole Smallville series, man. So I know exactly what
Oh
you're talking about.
man, his interpretation of Lex Luthor was spot on, man.
Mm,
Just brilliant. So yeah, that for me, he's just a brilliant villain because he almost wasn't a villain. That's
Yeah,
how
it's
good
like you like he's not a bad guy really, but
right, you know, right, you know, Clark, you keep lying to him, you know, it was like so yeah, I think his interpretation of Lex was fantastic.
yeah, indeed, man. All right, favorite anime or cartoon show?
Cartoon, I'll go with pretty much any of those. The DC universe cartoons, the animations that they do are just brilliant. I think DCU are losing when it comes to the films, even though Snyder Cut was good. But they're losing when it comes to the films. But all of those, Infinity Crisis,
Yeah, the anime
from Two
films are
Earths.
wonderful,
Oh
man. Yeah.
man, fantastic, man! That latest one with Darkseid, where he fights Trigon. Oh man, I think Apocalypse, that one is wow, 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 wow. I just feel like the animations are so I just love all of those, man. Flashpoint, I love Crisis on Two Earth. I love all of those.
Mm. All right. And then the Black History component, man. What's your favorite thing about Black History and teaching it, man?
Do you know what? I think what I love is just the look on people's faces when you start breaking down some of the things that we invented, that we created, that we were a part of. You know, things like you know, just and things like that are really on the sidelines of history that have been sidelined. You know, when you talk to people about the 250 plus slave revolts, you know, this because there's this narrative that black people just sort of laid down and accepted slavery. You know,
Yes.
in America
Never
alone, there
fought
was
back. Yep.
yeah, there's 250 in America alone. You know, Jamaica, you know, Jamaica had the Maroon Wars that we won. You know, to this day, there are places in Jamaica that are not that are separate from the rest of Jamaica and run by their own laws because they won against the British and signed treaties to be left alone. You know, Maroon Town, and these people don't know these things. You know,
Mm.
and so when you see that in light, oh my gosh, when you see that enlightenment for people, I think for me is really, really powerful. And I think as well, you see this kind of the kick up the backside look on people's faces when they start realizing the work that needs to be done. Because Black history brings into perspective how far we've fallen. I look at Africa in particular, and I liken Africa to an elephant. And if you've ever seen an elephant fall down, it's very hard to get up. And that's what Africa was. Africa was this giant elephant that was ruling the world. And when it fell over, when it finally fell down, because of lots of different problems internally as well as externally, and all of Africa's enemies attacked, she's had a hard time being able to stand back up, this great elephant. And so I think it's that awareness. So for me, that intrigues me, and the sense of pride that it instills in people, man. You know, when you see people realize what we're really about, you know, and that our history didn't start in the transatlantic slave holocaust, but, you know, started, you know, in Tarseti, you know, 3000, you know, BC, like, you know, we're talking about those great civilizations as well, you know. Yeah, it's
man.
that.
Could go on and on. Definitely.
That.
I know you've mentioned that you mentioned this earlier, man. That a lot of us are real life, you know, heroes within ourselves and what we're doing. And looking into Black history, who are some of your favorite, you know, heroes?
Marcus Garvey stands out. Marcus Garvey was a particularly powerful individual. His story is fantastic, and I cannot wait for them to make a biopic. I just hope they do it well. Marcus Garvey, for me, is not just the father of Pan-Africanism, but his blueprint. I personally always teach it that the so-called Jews stole his blueprint, because Marcus Garvey's blueprint was he had set up the militia, he had set up the Black Star Line with the ships, he had set up the Black Cross nurses, and his plan was to go to overthrow the government of Liberia because they were on nonsense at the time, take over Liberia, have Liberia as a home base for Black people, and from Liberia push back against the European influx and infiltration of Africa. And for me, that's what the Jews did. They looked at, I think they took that blueprint and they took Palestine as a ground zero as a Jewish homeland, as an Israeli homeland. And from there, they've managed to develop their secret service. They've managed to develop a nuclear arsenal. They've managed, and now they can protect Jewish rights globally. You know, you say something bad about a Jewish person, a Mossad agent will climb up out of your bathroom sink
That is a fact. That
and
man,
so you know, you can't believe me. And so to me, that was Garvey's blueprint, because
yeah,
that was Garvey's plan. You know, Garvey's plan for us. And so that's
man.
how I always teach it. Others have tried to say, no, Garvey took their blueprint, but I'm giving it to Garvey. So
Yeah,
yeah,
can you
Marcus Garvey.
imagine, saying something bad about a black person and then getting the same
Come on,
consequences?
man. You
Man,
know, and that's what he wanted for us, man. And that was the plan. And so I respect, and that's why the Honorable Elijah Muhammad has done so well with the nation, did so well with the Nation of Islam, is because he was a part of Marcus Garvey's movement. And
yeah,
so he saw it firsthand. And so, which is why he came and got the fruit of Islam and had the coffee shops and had the haulage firm and all of the great things, the schools, because he saw Garvey's blueprint, saw what it was. And if Garvey didn't get infiltrated by the J. Edgar Hoover and these guys and brought him down, his movement would have been phenomenal. So
agreed,
one
agreed,
of my heroes,
definitely, man,
definitely.
definitely. All right, our last favorite here. Your favorite part about being a father, man. I know you are a father of two, right?
No. I've got six.
Six. Oh, I didn't.
Three girls, yeah, three girls,
didn't
three
know.
boys. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah,
six,
yeah,
six,
yeah,
six,
yeah,
six.
yeah.
Major difference. Major difference.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, I just feel like for me, that ability to impart information, for me, that ability to I'm a strong believer that a parent's job, our job, is to successfully integrate our children into society. And for me, what that looks like is being a better version of me, looking at all of the areas where I failed and trying my best to guide my children that they don't hit any of those pit holes, and then that they build, and then hopefully they'll be able to do the same for their children, and they build and they build, and so it is understanding that process. I mean, I have a son turning 13 next year, and so we're currently planning his rite of passage ceremony, and the things that he's practicing his speeches. He's gonna do Rastafari. So he's Haile Selassie the First, the speech that he gave to the League of Nations, which Bob Marley turned into that song War. And so he's currently learning that off by heart, and learning. We've got some laws that we kind of live by, phrases, and so he's kind of just getting those, practicing those, what does it mean to be a man, and those kind of things that he's got to present at his rite of passage ceremony. And it's changing and creating tradition for ourselves, because we had that stripped away from us, not just our history, but not just our language, our culture and our traditions. And Professor Malanga Karenga says it's our responsibility to create culture. Yeah, if we can't reclaim culture, then we need to create culture. And so it's that creation with the family, and having your children as a part of that. And hopefully something that they will carry on and carry on and carry on until you've got legacy even within your own family, that they look back, why do we do this? Well, this fella up on the wall here, it was
Yeah.
so yeah, for me it's the potential, I guess, is the answer to that question.
Well said, man. You're giving me ideas, man. Right of passage. That's wonderful, man. Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
Man. All right. Speaking of that, let's talk about some legacy, man. Like years and years from now, man, when they are asking your son about his father, and all the work that you have done. What do you want that Barrett name to embody in people to think about when they think about you and your work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think for me, my ultimate my ultimate plan, what I want to bring into this reality, is a black school in the UK. That for me is really, really important, because I genuinely believe that schools are where our children are taken for them to be infected with white supremacy and that teaching. And I think the only way that we can combat that is through education. The only inoculation, the only vaccine against white supremacy is black education. and we need to be in control of that. And so for me, I feel like Black children need Black teachers. We need an African-centered curriculum. We need to cover all of the things that they cover in the regular curriculum, but just from our perspective, our history. Still going to have the maths, the science, the English languages, the African languages, all of those things. And so that is my ultimate plan. Is all of this is leading to that? Is leading to us having our own private education forum, school, to educate our children, and hope that that will be a catalyst in the UK in particular, because we just don't have that here, for that to be a catalyst to continue. Because I find that when you go to other countries, children that are educated by people that look like them, it's the same thing as the hero complex. There is something about teachers that warm to students. When I was in jail, I used to go to the education classes, and the majority of the women down there were Black females. The teachers were Black females, and they all took a liking to me. Why? And they were a lot older than me, the majority of them. And the reason why was because I remind them of their son. I remind them of their cousin. I remind them of their nephew. And there is that automatic wanting me to do well, that automatic going out of their way to help me, because there's that familial bond. And when we send our children to white educators, that is just not there. It doesn't matter how hard they try, it's not there. And so we need to be in that position that everyone in our schools, from the headmistress right the way through, they need to be Black, and that's for me, that's my life's work, is to produce that. And so in reflection, I will it to be that when I've transitioned to the other side and my family are here and they're talking about me, that it will be in that building, in that school, at that assembly.
Let's do it, man.
And that's what that's what it will be. So yeah, that's for me is what it is. That's the big picture, because I believe that is the ground zero to fix a lot of the problems in our society, man, and a lot of the problems that we have with each other is exactly that.
Well said, man. Powerful, and it embodies the work that you've been doing, the work that you are doing, and the future work you're planning on doing is all what you just said. So thank you for that, man. A lot of us don't get the accolades and the thank yous and the appreciation that we deserve, especially while we're alive, man. So I definitely want to give you your props and kudos to making a change in the world, like globally, man, because your stories are the stories that need to be told, from the comic book to the reality. So I appreciate that, man.
Thank you, bro. Much appreciated, man. Much appreciated.
Yes, sir. Man, it has been quite a journey today, man, and just a learning experience, man. We got everything, man. We got Black history, we got British history, we got the comic book information and history and the racism. Like, we got everything into one today. So definitely appreciate it, man. And if you could do us one last favor and leave us, with your favorite quote and what it means to you.
That's really easy. Pretty much at the opening of all of the comic books, the word from from the author, and I always end it with, when you're dreaming, aim for the stars, and if you only make it to the treetops, then at least you left the ground. And a former world champion called Trevor Ambrose, I was training out in Norway with him, and afterwards, after we finished the training session, he sat us all down and he was talking about dreams and aspirations. And he never, he never thought he'd be a world champion. He dreamt of it. He was never sure if he'd realize it, but he dreamt of being a world champion. And he said, so, when you dream and dream as big as you can, So he said, when you dream, aim for the stars. And even if you only make it to the treetops, then at least you left the ground. And for me, that is just so important, because oftentimes it's not that we aim too high and miss, it's that we aim too low and hit. And that's what keeps us just locked into mediocrity. And so for me, I just believe that people should dream ridiculous, just as big as it can be, my G, and go for it as well. Because if you don't hit it, you're going to hit somewhere close, man. And the close is going to be great, you know? And so that's where I'm at with that. So for me, that's my phrase, man. You know, when you're dreaming, aim for the stars. Because if you only make it to the treetop, then at least you left the ground. And I think that for me has always been, it's always echoed in the back of my mind. And so, yeah, man, just dream big, man, and really go for it, man. Really try and hit it.
Agreed, man. Agreed. That's a great quote, man. Great quote. All right. So where can people that are super inspired, that want to learn more, that want to support JBon Comics, that want to support Heru and grab their copies, like where do they go?
So the website is www.herucomics.com, and Heru is spelled Heru. So that's herucomics.com. The Instagram is JBN_comics, and JBN stands for Jason Barrett Entertains Our Nation. So it's JBEON. Yeah. So JBN Comics, JBN_comics is the Instagram. And my personal Instagram is just JMovieMan. That's just, you know, my personal Instagram. So, and there's a contact us page on the website, herucomics.com. So yeah, man, we're out here, man. We're out here. We're doing it. We're really doing it, you know, and we need your help. We always need your help, man, because it's not about me, it's about we. And so, you know, we need each other. So definitely get your copies, spread the word, you know, look out for the new titles, and let's do the damn thing.
Yes, sir. I got my copies, man. I got my audiobook. I'm waiting for more audiobooks. The audiobook was amazing.
I'm glad you liked it, man. That was like an experiment, man. So yeah, we're going to do more. Definitely.
Indeed, man. Man, I don't remember last time I was this excited about a project that somebody's doing, but I'm excited, man. And I cannot wait just for more and more. Until, you know, like we get this universe, until we get our encyclopedia, until we get our animated movie, until we get our animated series and all this kind of stuff, man. I'm going to be with you 100% all the way, man, because I just love what you're doing, man.
Boom. Thank you, my bro. Much appreciated. And likewise, man, keep doing this amazing stuff. Like I said, you know, you guys that create the platforms are just as important as the people that stand on them. You know, never forget that, man. You know, sometimes a lot of people, if they can't be the creator or the movie star or the rapper, you know, they don't want to be involved. And sometimes it's not about that. There's a story in the book of David. I think it's David wanted to build the temple. He wanted to build a temple for God. And God said to him, no, you're a man of war. Your hands have got blood on them. You can't build me a temple. And so it was left to Solomon, David's son, to build the temple. But what David did, he did everything he could. He made sure that the cedars came in from Lebanon. He made sure that, you know, the shittim wood had come. He made sure that everything was in place. And so sometimes, even if you're not going to be the star, do all that you can to help propel that star. And those in and of itself, those have got their own great rewards, you know. And so I always commend guys like yourselves for creating these platforms, because, you know, we can't do it. We can't do it without you. It's a symbiosis, you know, and a lot of the time you guys don't get the props. And so likewise, what you said to me earlier about giving you guys your flowers and your soup while you're alive to enjoy them, I think it's important that, you know, people get the props that they deserve while they're alive. So yes, salute to you, my brother, for the amazing work.
Appreciate you, man.
Definitely, man. I love it, bro.
Yes, sir. All love, man. All love. Listeners, man, thank you for listening. I hope you learned and you were inspired as much as I am today. I kind of like want to go back and reread Heru right now, like, you know, so I am hyped, man. So yeah, thank you for listening. Please share the comic with your friends, share it with your family, share it with everyone. Anyone can read it. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot to be inspired by. And, you know, reinvent your imagination, man. Start seeing us in these, you know, roles of heroes and being successful, being intelligent, doing amazing things, and then spread that throughout the rest of your community, man. So Again, thank you for listening. Spread the word. JBon Comics, Heru. Let's do this. Let's make this into, you could tell him like, yo, I remember when he was on MasterMine and now, he's making a movie, he's doing this, he's doing that. And trust me, we'll be seeing that, man. So support the movement, support Black business, and let's do this together. And remember, your mind is the most powerful tool in the universe. Therefore, if you can think it, you can do it. If you believe in it, you can be it. And if you fight for it, you can have it. The world is yours. This has been your host, Mr. G, and I will see you next time on MasterMind.
So every day I'm going hard. I'm talking business, bank accounts, and credit cards. And somehow we defeat the odds and making sure that no one starves illegal. All you had